Welcome to the Living Medicine Podcast, where we talk about ethical medical use of psychedelic psychotherapy, teaching skills, examining the issues, and interviewing interesting people. Now let's start today's show.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Sandy Newis, and this is Living Medicine, the podcast where I interview interesting and influential people in the psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy field and related areas. This podcast is sponsored by Living Medicine Institute, which is a business I run that we provide teaching, training, content, and resources for therapists, clinicians, and medical professionals who are interested in learning more about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And you can find us at livingmedicineinstitute.com, and we have a training retreat coming up in September. So I am excited today to have Ted Riskin with us. And Ted is a psychotherapist specializing in relationship issues and transpersonal therapy. He has certifications in internal family systems, level 3, holotropic breathwork, core energetics, hypnotherapy, breath therapy, and EMDR. He developed a GroupKAP program that is currently in his 5th year. And he is also from Asheville. So I am excited that I get to be in close community with him. And what I know as Ted is kind of the IFS expert and really a pioneer in incorporating IFS more specifically and intentionally into psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And so I'm excited to have you be here, Ted. So thank you so much for agreeing to be here. And I look forward to the conversation.
Me too.
Good, great. So I always like to ask people just to start with kind of what is your own pathway into this work? I mean, one of the things, everybody comes from varied backgrounds, but, it sounds like you have this psychedelic, you are kind of I just kind of joked before we started about you being like the psychedelic renaissance man, but you're checking a lot of the kind of adjacent boxes too, and just the general non-ordinary state work. So the holotropic breath work and the core energetics and, all of those different things. So, so maybe just tell us a little bit about what your pathway into this work is and kind of how these different streams come together for you.
Yeah, well, I was aware you read kind of a long list of stuff. And I think, I've never had my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And for all y'all that have kids, I'm sure they're great and it's worth it. But I feel really privileged to have had enough time and resources to do these kinds of trainings and kind of do them one after another and find how they support each other and how they're different and how they're the same. And so, yeah, just kind of one after another. I think in terms of non-ordinary states, when you are studying with Stan, you're going to find out about opportunities to try different ways of accessing those states. So that's sort of where I really got introduced.
What years did you actually study? So you actually studied with Stan Grof. That's one of your claims to fame.
What was that?
That's one of your claims to fame, part of your psychedelic pedigree.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I feel
that's
fortunate.
A big deal.
Yeah, he just had his 95th birthday and there was a nice event. And, he doesn't really speak much, but he's still Stan,
Right, right.
So, yeah, I believe I was certified in 1998.
Okay. All right.
That training goes on for a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And I know Michael and Annie Midhopper come from that, and several of other people that have been on here as well.
Rick Doblin.
Right. Yeah. Well, so kind of, when you think about, these different streams coming together for you, do you feel like they're distinct? Do you feel like they inform each other? Do all of these things are they all foundational for you?
I'd say the foundational ones are breath work, especially holotropic breath work. Though I've, trained in some other ones, and I really love a woman named Carol Lampman who does a training program. Core energetics and then internal family systems. And, as I was thinking about this question, I was thinking how when you enter a world like that, you is it a cult? I mean, sometimes people call these things cults, but there's definitely kind of a worldview that gets imparted to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, and this is what I find interesting, that there are sort of prescriptions for how to do things. And so like in holotropic breathwork, it's about the inner healer.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who's directing it, right from the start, named Tab Sparks, the first thing he wrote was called Doing, Not Doing.
Mm.
So it was right from the start, it's very much, all right, everyone, stop doing stuff and
Right.
trust that there's something else happening. And the best thing you could always do is get out of the way.
Mm.
And so that became, and these guys never, like Stan certainly never held anything as dogma,
Mm-hmm.
but the people do. And right, so and I can understand why, because it's like if you have it's like it's the Ten Commandments, not the Ten Suggestions. You don't say, hey, try not to kill people. It's probably a good idea, because then people are going to make exceptions. So
Right.
here it's like always trust the inner healer. But even then, I remember someone saying, the inner healer can be in the practitioner too. And I remember seeing people doing holotropic breath work and just looping, like having the same experience for more than a year. And so you go, maybe there are exceptions. And then when you get into other models that are much more willing to intervene, then you go, okay, well, maybe there's a place for that too, if I can honor. Um, and there's forms of breathwork like Judith Kravitz's, where they poke you and flip you around. And I did it with her once, and they took my water bottle, they cut the top off my water bottle and stuck it in my mouth. I was very confused at the end of the session what had happened.
You're like,
Uh,
wait a minute, what?
so these are things that if someone who does holotropic breathwork saw them, they would flip out. They would be
Uh-huh.
so sacrilegious. So
Right.
yeah, so being able to kind of honor these, and the one in IFS, the big one in IFS is not to push on protectors, right?
Mhm.
Honor the protectors and keep checking. Are you okay? Don't be pushy. And so that's a great rule.
Mhm.
And but as soon as you give someone a psychedelic, yeah, I think you're breaking that rule.
Mhm.
And so, how do we draw on the best of both or all approaches and tailor it to the moment?
Yeah. Interesting. So do you feel like, I mean, I know you primarily through your expertise with IFS and also with ketamine and psychedelics. And so I'm aware of these other things that you're doing, but was there something that like when IFS came to the forefront for you and you really devoted yourself for that felt really distinct about that? Or what drew you to really becoming like an instructor in that? And what is it about IFS what is it about IFS that you love that is value added?
Well, what comes to me is that I have a very strong mental part,
Uh-huh.
and it's hard for me to let that go and just be in my body. And I had done in the core energetic training, I just felt stupid in that way of like, because I was in my head, and I just somehow I felt like I'm not doing it right and I'm not good at this.
Mm.
And then IFS is a much more cerebral. I mean, it's not that it ignores the body. There's a lot of tuning into the body,
Hmm.
but to learn this model takes some ability to sequence some steps and think it through. And so I felt like, oh, I'm much better at this than I was at core energetics.
Oh, interesting. So it gave you kind of a cognitive map, right? Is that?
Yeah, and let me bring my strength to a therapy rather than in core. I mean, core energetics is brilliant, and I'm so happy, just for what that's brought to me. But
Yeah.
I'd never felt as competent at it.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, so you've talked about IFS and, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and as being pretty natural partners. So what do you think about the IFS model that maps well onto that and other non-ordinary states of consciousness? Like what is particularly unique about IFS? Because I mean, I've talked to multiple people, like I had Bob Falconer on here, and Harvey Schwartz was the last guest, and we were kind of talking about how IFS is, sweeping the world, and Dick Schwartz has been on here. And so there's this thread, right? Like IFS is almost like embedded not just as a technique, but now as like a kind of a lens for psychedelics. So, what do you think it is about that maps so well onto psychedelics and other non-ordinary states?
I think there's different ways to answer that, but what Michael Mithofer said, I ran into him at a conference and knew him from Holotropic Breathwork, and he was at that time so excited to watch people take MDMA and then start talking in parts.
Right.
And so it wasn't so much, oh, that it maps well. It's like, this is how it is. And the MDMA is just kind of deprogramming people to this idea that I should be one thing.
Mm.
And then they just naturally get it.
Yeah.
So, generally I don't believe in things, but I drank all the IFS Kool-Aid, and to me, this is how it is. Like, this is how the psyche is organized in
Okay.
these parts. And they
Hmm.
and their functions are protectors and exiles,
Hmm.
and that there is self-energy.
Hmm.
So the psychedelics kind of open that up.
Uh-huh.
Um, but now that if you're already in that map, you can watch what's happening and be effective.
Hmm. So for you, it's just like what I'm hearing you say there is just it's a really good map of how the psyche works.
Yep.
And I mean, would you say then that like psychedelics kind of magnify that? Or like how does that, is it just like what's the relationship between IFS and psychedelics then? I mean, I heard you already say with Michael Midhopper, and I think they did a study on it, right? Where they were actually kind of like counting how often parts just naturally emerge. And I see that as well. I mean, I'm IFS informed, but certainly not certified. And it just happens. Like, well, there's a part of me this and a part of me that. And
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. They, I mean, to me, if I'm talking to a person, I'm in this model. Like
uh-huh.
oh, there's a part that's who's trying to do this. And
Hmm.
if I see someone, what were we saying earlier about don't be a dick? Like if I see someone being a dick, it's like, okay, well, that's their part, that's being a dick. And but underneath, there's something really vulnerable and soft, and that dick part's trying to protect it. And
Uh-huh.
so I don't know that this model is particularly um, lining up with psychedelics as much as it just lines up with people.
Oh, that's so interesting. And just in case anybody's wondering, it's because we were talking about this because I actually have two teenage boys, and the DBAD phrase, like "don't be a dick," has actually made it into my household as like kind of a core defining piece. So, right, but it's true when we have these parts. So, well, so okay, so I know that you incorporate IFS and ketamine work, and it sounds like you have a consultation group. Is that correct? Like on IFS and ketamine, or you're part of one, or you run one?
Oh, our local Google group for
Uh-huh.
ketamine practitioners. I just started one for IFS practitioners who were doing ketamine. And
Great.
then someone in that group started having monthly meetings.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, a
Okay.
few people just get together and talk about IFS and ketamine.
Great. Well, so okay, so whether it's ketamine or other psychedelics, like, what does change, like, what is the goal? Like, what does change look like from an IFS perspective? And a little bit of context for this question is when you and I first talked a bit ago, I kind of mentioned role of developmental history, and you said something to the effect of like, well, we don't really need developmental history because that's not really what it's about. And, that's interesting to me because I'm very psychodynamic and, that kind of pieces. And so from your perspective, like when we're working from an IFS model, like what does change actually look like?
Well, first, I don't want to speak for everyone else, like we don't need it. So maybe
Right.
other
Well,
people need
you.
it, but
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
So when someone comes for therapy, I'm not really interested in their whole history. If they want to
Hmm.
tell me, I'll listen.
Hmm.
But all that comes out once you do the work and you start listening to exiles, and they'll just show you, and they're going to show you the history that matters, not the history that the person decided was important.
Hmm.
But the stated goal of IFS therapy, I guess you'd say, is self-leadership.
Hmm.
And in that way, when people use psychedelics to connect with something larger than themselves, something spiritual. Um, to me, IFS brings us there in a way that's, to me, interesting because it's subtractive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that I get to know my parts and are able to communicate with them, and the system starts to feel seen and known and relaxed, the more these parts can step back, the more self-energy I feel. And to me, someone in one of my groups last week said something about striving for enlightenment.
Mm.
And it seems to me like there's no such thing as enlightenment. Like enlightenment happens moment by moment. Like if in any moment my parts are just chill and I'm breathing and I'm feeling present and uh, some joy and connection and compassion, then I'm enlightened in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. So, what does, if you like when you're in self energy or you are working with somebody and are, assuming or asking or hypothesizing they're in self energy, like how does one know they're in self energy? Like, what are you witnessing in others? What are you feeling in yourself? Like, what is that? What is that?
Well, first, I hear people talk about this sometimes like I was in self energy and then I wasn't, but then I got back in it again. Like, I don't think it's so black and white. There's, our parts can carry a lot of self energy. And so to me, it's more of a continuum. And how can we be feeling more of that? And, uh, you know, I think for me, I feel it in my body. I feel calm. I feel compassion. I feel present. Um, I'm not attached to an agenda.
Mm,
Um, and my breath is open. I think that like if there's one thing I want to check, if
yeah.
I'm holding my breath, there's some part going on here.
Oh, interesting. So that's kind of a somatic state piece that you might check in with yourself.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I work very somatically. So if I were also working, kind of blending those two things, I might be looking at, kind of, I call it state versus content, like overall state. And that would that be something you might map that onto different parts or different energies or self energy? Do people become aware of themselves in different states too?
Well, I would map the content onto parts,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and self is the space that holds the content or is a witness for whatever the content is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so let's back up for a second. One of the things that I am aware of is people who are deeply steeped in IFS as you are, um, that there are some really critical parts of the model. And like I would say, what are the questions, baby, that we can kind of weave in through this is the difference between being, really truly an IFS practitioner and just kind of IFS informed or parts, just doing parts work. And so just in a kind of a basic introductory way, like what do you think are the most critical parts of the IFS model for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy? And that may or may not be different than if you were doing it without psychedelics, but like what are the kind of, nutshell, kind of what are the critical components?
Wow. Um, well, as a practitioner, it would be to to embrace self-energy, as much as possible, to notice parts of me that are popping in, asking
Mm-hmm.
for some space. I think, and whether it's psychedelics or not, in a way, as a practitioner, if we can bring that into a session, that's going to be beneficial for whoever we're in the room with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think understanding about protectors
Mm-hmm.
is helpful because psychedelics tend to be challenging for protectors. And if we don't really get that, then we're ignoring something that's important that's going on in the system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about exiles? Can you say a little bit about exiles?
Good old exiles.
Yeah. What exactly is an exile? And how do we get them back?
Yeah, how do we get them back? I mean, I think that is the question, right? And
Right.
um, if if we want to heal, which means become more whole,
Mm-hmm.
Actually, to me, that just means getting our exiles, reconnecting to our exiles. And that's why we're not whole, because they've been split off and they're out somewhere not connected to the system. So, in a way, that's if the goal is self-leadership, the heart of the work is the healing of the exiles, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So exiles are, the way I see it, is the parts that aren't doing anything. They don't have a function. So they're there just having feelings and beliefs. And when they're burdened, that means that they're in some way stuck in the past and trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, the heart of the model is when we go back in time and let them show us where they're in trauma, and then we can really deconsolidate. If you know Bruce Ecker's work and memory deconsolidation,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're doing. And the IFS model is very effective at bringing out that traumatic memory, the implicit, the emotional aspect of it, really letting people feel that in their body, and then creating the prediction error, what Bruce calls, like the mismatch, a reparative experience on top of it, which
Mm-hmm.
according to the theory is how you erase the trauma memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
so
and
in psychedelics,
how do parts become exiled? Like, is it just like an unacceptable element, or is it memories and time periods that we just don't want to deal with or don't like about ourselves? And of course, this is a huge question, but like, and how is that different than DID? Right? Like DID, I mean, Harvey Schwartz talked last time about like that comes from like severe trauma, which would of course be exile. So, how do you differentiate those things?
so I'm just telling you how I see some of this stuff. So DID, and I don't know if this would be diagnostically accurate, but I just see it as parts that are so disconnected that things can happen and they don't even know that it happened. And then
Mm-hmm.
a different part, that part might come back and they weren't even aware of what went on.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates its own difficulties, especially about getting consent and for anything, and not even with psychedelics, just to say hello to an exile.
Yeah.
If there's a part that doesn't want to go there, but it's not in the room, you won't hear from it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like we all are that. We all have these various parts, and often they don't know about each other, and they can be against each other. And um, I don't know that, I think the question is, how do exiles get burdened?
Mm-hmm.
And why do we exile them? Yes, and it's not just because we don't like them, it's because when we're young, if they fully came and were felt, it would be too much. Like we don't have a container for it. We don't have Children have self-energy in a way, but not that kind of ability to contain something that's difficult. And so the way we get through childhood is we just split off all that stuff so we can
Mm-hmm.
make it to the next day. Then we spend the rest of our lives trying to find them again.
Mm-hmm.
And which, by the way, we don't have to just try to find them. Life will give them to us, right? So if you believe in the inner healer, then when you're doing a psychedelic and there's an exile that needs to be healed, it may come up.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're not prepared for that, that's called a bad trip because people weren't signing up for that, but they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's an opportunity to welcome that exile. If you're not doing psychedelics, you can always get married, and then same thing will happen. That person will be your psychedelic and make you feel the stuff that you've been trying not to feel.
Right. So, for what I'm hearing you say is kind of a level of intensity, relational or state intensity, kind of taking us out of our prescribed reality might be something that brings exiles to the surface.
I think anything that's traumatic, anything that's we can't process. That's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And this burdens the exiles, when they get burdened with that feeling of trauma, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and often certain beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the protectors help us function by keeping them away enough.
Okay. All right. So people talk a lot about protectors in psychedelic work. And it's to me, it's the easiest part of the model to recognize. Like, because for me, it maps onto defense structures that, it's a, and so I notice that a lot. And that might be a me thing, it might be my background, it might be training, it might be in everything. But I mean, a lot of people talk about the protectors and that we have to get for permissions. Other people talk about protectors as being kind of softer or more permeable in psychedelic states. Then they're like they get intensified in psychedelic states or they get frightened or reorganized. What is your sense about what happens to protective systems during psychedelics? And then maybe even just a piece about this piece about consent, like do we have to get the protector's consent? Like how do we do that? Like let's just talk about that a bit.
Um, the different medicines seem to affect them differently.
Oh, interesting. Uh-huh.
But in general, it seems they're not able to get their job done as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and, when Stan would give a talk about the healing potential of non-ordinary states, he came from an LSD world and then developed the breathwork after that became illegal. But he
Mm-hmm.
also mentions all these other things like a sweat lodge and
Mm,
fasting and pain. And, there's many, many techniques that humans
right.
do to kind of shut down the cortical functions and allow deeper levels of brain function to emerge. And even the breathing, the theory is that without getting into all the details, that it kind of slightly reduces oxygen in the prefrontal cortex. And so, which is maybe where the protectors live, where they're functioning. So they just can't get the job done.
Right.
And if you're if you're like so we see parts as people, like they do the same things people do, right? And
Mhm.
so if you're a person whose whole existence is predicated on getting a certain job done, and all of a sudden something happens and you can't get that job done, it's terrifying.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say you have to get consent, but if you don't, there's liable to be some kind of a backlash.
Like what?
Um, Well, next time you want to do psychedelics, the part might not let you, or will
Mhm.
sabotage it, or sometimes um, people can just kind of be in a state of anxiety after a session that's not well integrated. I
Mm,
think at the minimum, we want to go back to the protectors after an experience and go, "Hey, are you okay?" And
mm,
sorry in a way to do that to you, but there were other parts in here that really wanted growth, that really wanted to open things up, that was really important to them. I know you
mm.
probably weren't ready for this, even though we tried to get you ready. And tell me what it was like, and just be a witness for like how scary it is to not be able to get that job done.
Mm. And the job is what?
To keep the system functioning
Mm-hmm.
and by not letting it be overwhelmed by exiles.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So not letting it be overwhelmed by the vulnerability and the emotions that the exiles are holding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this first time I did ketamine was with Tiffany. And she had a little group of therapists, and it was great. And we talked in the morning, and then we had a break. And I took a walk and said, I'm going to check with my parts about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel in my body there was an anxiety. I'd never done this medicine before, so I tried talking to her, like, well, so tell me what's going on. And the part was saying, those 10 years that you were doing ayahuasca,
Mm-hmm.
like twice a year, we hated it every time. And we're not happy that you made us go through that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't give consent. Another part of me was like, I'm doing this.
Right.
And um, so I was able to apologize and say, wow, I get that that didn't feel good for you. Um, I guess I asked, what do you need now if we're going to do this? And somehow the idea came that I will be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, somehow I just hit upon to saying, you know what, whatever happens, I'll be here. And then they calmed down.
Okay.
And I'll say like this comes out of so about IFS and psychedelics. Actually, my own experience speaks to this because in this 10 years of doing ayahuasca, I pretty much blended with terror. In other
Oh.
words, my terrified parts came out and I was in hell realms. Like there's a lot of different hell realms that you could explore. And it was not fun. And but there was so much of this exhale energy that there was very little self in my body to witness it. There was just enough to know that it wasn't going to be forever.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was embracing the notion that it would be forever, because if I'm in a hell realm, if it's a hell realm, it's going to be forever. But
Right.
something in me knew, like, and when you throw up, you're going to start to feel better, and it's going to be beautiful. And but after learning IFS, and I moved down here, went back for another ayahuasca session, and I just got it. Like I was able to sit up, breathe, and just, I don't know, I don't want to say I was grasping onto self energy, but somehow I was like, I'm staying in this place. And
Mm-hmm.
as each part came with its difficult feelings or terror or whatever it was, I was able to say hello and hold space and bring compassion to it. And it was amazing. And from that place, I could watch the shaman and I realized what he was doing. Like he would go up to someone and poke them, or if someone sort of collapsed on the ground, would make them sit up. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he's telling them, like calling back self energy into the body. Like you need to stay in self energy and be the witness for this stuff. Don't just let it take you over.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That's so interesting because some of my, teachings with sacred plants from, teachers in that arena are very much about, grounding yourself in what you would call self energy, like the center channel, the center tube, like connecting with that and, those kinds of same kind of practices. And then I map that onto my own kind of the language I use is state work, like what happens in your overall state, your overall felt sense when you do ground into that place. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, do you see those things as being similar? Or are we speaking of the same
I think
phenomenon?
so. Yeah. I think there's a state where it's like if you have self energy and part energy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a state where there's a lot of self energy and not a lot of part energy.
Yeah.
And that's a nice place to be. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's a state where there's a lot of part energy and not a lot of self energy. And that is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't rise and fall like this, I don't think. I think there's a state where you have high self energy and high part energy, and that's where the healing happens. So that's where these exiles get to be felt. It's like, oh, oh, you know me because you're feeling me right now in your body. So I feel known. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also a witness, there's self in there that's saying, yeah, I get how you feel. And also it's okay. You're okay. And I'm here.
It's interesting because one of the things, tell me if this is accurate, is that I sense it in you. I have a colleague, Kathleen Dine, who does IFS work, and I feel it from her. I've witnessed it with Dick Schwartz and Bob Falconer, both on the podcast. It seems like this piece around compassion, that just like holding compassion for all of the different parts seems to be. I don't know if that's something that comes with experience, like that people just sort of evolve in that as humans, or if it's something that is taught in the model. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I would say it's inherent in self energy. You don't have to do
Mm,
anything.
mm,
So again, it's if you're they call it a I think that's the code calls I have as a constraint release model, right? So
uh-huh.
you're finding parts. You're finding parts that aren't compassionate. You're finding parts that are judgmental. You're getting to know them. You're asking them, what are you afraid would happen if you weren't being judgmental? And you find out what they're protecting you from, and you unburden them. And you unburden the exiles, then you unburden the protectors. And as they're more willing to step back, the compassion's already there.
Mm.
Just like patience, like there's no such thing as patience. There's
Mm.
just parts that are impatient. When they step back, then it looks like patience, but it's not a thing. It's just not being rushed or whatever.
Mm. So you just think that's kind of more the like natural condition of self energy, like is
Hmm.
it passion and patient and slow moving and just, I mean, I sense a lot of active curiosity always, like, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to do any of these things, it's a part.
Mm-hmm.
So there's parts, I think, we call them self-like parts, right? And they'll go, wow, self just got a lot of praise for doing, I could do that too. Like I can be compassionate. And then you go, oh, that must be so painful. And, it's a part, performing compassion. But when parts step aside, all that stuff is just there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, so kind of back to this idea of the protectors, and I might just be kind of attached to that because it's the one that I see the most, and that's the lens. If there's kind of an interesting dilemma that I have faced when I'm with a client where, working with ketamine and, where you get this kind of like defensive place, like where people are kind of like stuck, or maybe they're holding, or they're like, I don't know about that, or, like, or maybe they're kind of like going cognitive. Like that's something I track a lot where people kind of like loop into the cognitive and I'm very somatic. So they'll leave the body and any thoughts on how when you're kind of like witnessing like a protector that might, kind of benefit from, relationship and curiosity, more active acknowledgement maybe versus kind of, is there a place for kind of pushing through that ever? Like, how do we know? Is it going to intensify it? Is it going to block them more, open it up? And, what are your thoughts about that from your perspective?
Well, this kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about kind of seeing how different models work and
Hmm.
some that will push past protectors and then some like IFS or somatic experiencing that won't.
Mm.
The analogy that I like is if you had to get a cat out of a room,
Hmm.
you could push the cat,
Hmm.
which will not work well.
I'm a cat
And
person. I've had cats my whole life.
so it doesn't
You have
work.
to go out the door now.
Yeah, so if you can entice the cat with a treat and the cat leaves, that's great. But
Hmm.
sometimes that won't work. That's not enough to get the cat to leave.
Right,
Sometimes you just have to pick up the cat and move the cat.
right, right,
And so if you're working,
right. Yeah.
so if you're, in a way, maybe beginning therapists are like trying to push the cat and they're like, maybe you should stop drinking or, like, well, you're not a bad person or it's like trying to like push on whatever that defense is, which tends not to be effective. So if
Hmm.
if you can through IFS get these parts to step back, then great. If you can't, and yes, there's patience. You earlier said like, well, you can move slowly. It's not about moving slowly because there's we're gonna die, and if you
Hmm.
take 10 years to help someone make a shift, maybe it would have been better if you did it in 1 year. And
Hmm.
so that there may be a time when you decide. Another analogy, your 5-year-old doesn't want to go to school.
Hmm.
Do you just go, well, honey, like school is fun. And whenever you're ready to go to school, we'll have you go to school, but not until you're ready. But I'm going to explain to you why it's going to be safe. No, sometimes that's just not enough. You have to physically bring the kid to school. Now you can be a dick about it, right? Like you could yell at the kid.
We are going to
Yeah.
school.
Or you could very kindly and compassionately say, I know this is scary and this is what's going to happen right now, and you're going to be okay. And if you need anything, they can call me and just provide whatever reassurance you can. So that's how I'd want to work with protectors.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, you said that, and I just kind of I felt that in my body, just this kind of like melting, softening. Like that's a good approach, right? Like, I can see that you're scared, and we're gonna put your coat on, and we're still gonna do the thing, and the supports are available to you, but it's time, right? We worked up to
Yeah.
being U5 and going to school, and so we've worked up to this point, and now it's the time to do the thing. So,
And just to be clear though, that idea is conflict conflicting with the IFS model, the way I see it, which is just the protectors will step aside once they trust you enough, and if you're not pushing, and eventually they will grant you access to the exiles if you know how to do the model.
mhm.
So I'm curious how Dick would answer this. I watched your interview with Dick, and I don't remember even address this, but when you introduce a psychedelic, like, is that in violation of the model? Like, or how do you justify that?
Right, right. I mean, it's like inherently, like you said, your protectors are like all in terror, and we hated that, right? I mean, it makes sense, So, I mean, for me, it's like that just also kind of maps onto, I'm a big proponent of lots and lots of preparation. And that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is preparation, medicine, integration. It's not just the medicine. And I feel like we really overemphasize the how to do the medicine piece when really the medicine is a tool and it's part of an overall process with safety in relationship being at the core. And I think when we attend to those pieces, on the one hand, we might actually be able to see protectors more clearly, right? Because it's like they come up and they're allowed to be seen. On the other hand, that's what we need to do. It's help people feel safe with us. So,
Yeah.
so
And I
let's
don't think
talk.
there's,
Go ahead.
well, 'cause I think in some ways it doesn't even matter what you're doing, just the time
Mm-hmm.
where the person gets to know the facilitator and start to realize, like, okay, this is a good person and I'm willing to
Mm-hmm.
trust them. And it just takes time sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So let's talk, we just have a couple more minutes. So let's talk about the therapist role and then kind of what you love about group ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So, how do we know as therapists when our own parts are in the way, when our own protective parts, expert parts, anxious parts, or agenda driven parts that are in the room? I mean, because it's going to happen. So, any suggestions about what we need to be tracking in ourselves or levels of awareness that we as clinicians need to learn or explore? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, did you just say that the job of the practitioner is to be a parts detector
Mm-hmm,
and in the client, but also in ourselves?
mm-hmm,
And, in our course, when we're doing practice sessions, it's sort of half learning the maneuvers and the techniques, and it's half just practicing being aware as a therapist, like, oh, here's a part of me that wants to help the person. Here's a part of me that wants them to like me. Here's a part of me that is afraid of them getting angry, and here's a part. So I think we can refine that ability to notice our parts. And sometimes we have or maybe always, we have to take it to our own therapy to see what's underneath those protectors. So if I notice, like, wow, I'm just like fawning with this client.
mm-hmm,
Well, what is that part afraid would happen if I didn't? Well, they get mad at me. What would that feel like? Oh, what is my exile in the past where someone is raging at me and it's traumatic, and
mm-hmm,
can I heal that part? And so um, it's a lot of our own work. I want to say Kylia Taylor, who's another one of the original holotropic breathwork people,
mm-hmm.
wrote a great book way back then called The Ethics of Caring, and she revised it for psychedelics. And and in there, she's sort of going through the various exiles we might, she doesn't call it, she's not coming from an IFS place, but our need for love, our need for sex, our need for money, our need for approval. And I think it's a great, I would recommend that to anyone who's doing this work. Like, get to know what are the pitfalls that could happen? What are the parts of you that might jump in and take over from self and impose something on what the client's experiencing?
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I know for myself, the desire to be helpful. Like, like of course we are all have a desire to be helpful, but when does that kind of skew my lens and take me into like being more agenda driven or getting into that kind of insecure, am I doing it right? Am I doing it well? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Should I be doing something else? Right. Which then I mean, I know like that does take me out of self energy. Like I'm not as present. I'm either maybe distracted or I'm certainly not as present. And I really believe in that energetic presence as being a critical part of the equation. So,
It,
mm,
to me, it seems that either the part is in my body or it's
mm,
somewhere else out there. And
yeah,
I'm fine with all these parts out there who are analytical and goes, oh, I think I know where this is going and here's what to do next. And if they're out there and just giving me ideas, that's great. If the part goes, I
yeah.
really want to help them or I want them to, it's fine. It's all fine. But I don't want them in my body.
Mm. Oh,
So
I mean,
that's what I'm checking for.
that's so interesting because you started to say like core energetics was like so in the body that you liked IFS because it was cognitive, but I can see, you repeatedly reference the body, and I can even kind of, I mean, sense into it feels like as you talk more that you get more and more in your body. So it does sound like it's a pretty body-based way of knowing for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've did, decades of work, well, as a student and as a faculty. So yeah,
Right.
no matter how much in my head I like to be, you can't do that and not be affected by it.
Right. Well, so, this could be another really long piece, but I do want to at least mention it. The piece about, what you said about the therapist and the parts, and, we can be in a relationship with them, but they entered their body. That's when it's problematic. And, I think I see a lot of people getting so attached to the IFS model that they actually do leave their body and they get stuck in their head and it becomes this kind of like cognitive process. Um, or, that would just be one way. I mean, I'm curious what you think about, could it become overly constraining or could people be overusing it, misapplying it, like getting too stuck in the model that they might miss some pieces? What are your thoughts about that?
I suppose someone could have a part who thinks their job is to IFS the person. And if that part blends, then they're going to be doing that instead of kind of
Uh-huh.
following along with what really wants to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything inherently problematic in the model, but I think we could use anything and get attached to it or have a strong agenda with it, and that's going to take us out of self-energy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, so I know that you love GroupKAP, and I know that you do beautiful programs that people have spoken really highly of, and those are available to people who might be listening. So I'll just give that a plug for you because I know that those are great. Um, so what do you love about group ketamine work? What is different about it than individual? What keeps drawing you to that? I mean, you obviously have a whole life history of doing group work, which I can recognize and appreciate, but what else? What is it about the group cap that's so special to you?
Well, I mean, practically, we can make it affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So to have, one-on-one just sitting just seems a little indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that thing with Tiffany, that was 10 minutes in, that was my first insight. Like, why is this professional sitting here to hand me some water? When for decades I watched people come in off the street and do holotropic breathwork and just be wonderful sitters.
Right.
So that's the practical thing. But we spoke earlier about nature, and I know that you so appreciate the healing potential of just when people feel a disconnect from the natural world, like
Right.
what the impact of that is and how important it is for them to reconnect with that. And I think in the same way, we get disconnected from our bodies. And
Mm-hmm.
so we want to, we do a body awareness piece of integration whenever we do a group cap, but also other people. Like that's a real place where people feel alienated and disconnected. And
Yeah.
it's mainly from things, we learn when we're little about who people are and how they're going to treat us. And we bring those expectations in to the world, and then we act in certain ways because of those expectations that kind of ensure that those things happen, right?
Mm.
And then you go to therapy, and then your therapist isn't treating you that way. But something in there is going like, well, they're nice to me because I'm paying them, you know?
Yeah.
So I really do suck, but they're just, yeah, they're being nice to me.
Yeah.
So you get in a room with people just or just random people,
Hmm.
and if, in the group there's sort of an ethos of non-judgment,
Right.
it's just lovely. And just watching people love each other and watching it's the same every time, kind of, there's little variations, but as people start to warm up and take risks and speak about something that's vulnerable, and then other people just kind of drop and feel more present, and
Right.
that gives them permission to bring their exiles into the room. And I don't think you can do that one-on-one. So
Right. Yeah.
I'm really hoping people, and and you're in a neuroplastic state, right? So you have the potential to rewire your brain. There's like, what does relationship mean to me? And how do I need to show up to be connected with people? Do I have to entertain them? Do I have to be good enough? Or can I just be who I am? And so we're really wanting to combine, the neuroplasticity with new ways of understanding what relationship is.
Well, it's so interesting because, so many of our, struggles and challenges, in my opinion, just to simplify, come from a disconnect from self world and others. And so, you know, obviously you can be like, well, that's everything. And I think group work, because we do groups in our retreats and as part of our level one training, and I love it. And I think that, with psychedelic group work specifically, it's very difficult to maintain any sort of mask. And I think people kind of quickly realize that the efforting in maintaining some sort of social persona to maintain that in a longer term group experience with the added intensity of non ordinary states of consciousness is hard. I think it allows you to kind of see how much efforting can it require. If it requires this much efforting in this situation, then we have a parallel about how much efforting it requires in our life. And I think to have those things happen concurrently where you realize the efforting, but then you also get the experience of like what it's like to not be. I think that is a really beautiful piece of the equation for group work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. The group itself is like a psychedelic in that it makes the defense not functional. If our defense is, I'll be who you want me to be,
Yeah.
right? So if we grew up and the way we survived in our family is, I'll be who you want me to be, but everyone wants me to be someone different. As long
Mhm.
as I'm dealing with you one at a time, I can do it. And once I
Right.
get in a group of you, I can't do that anymore. And that defense kind of is disrupted, and it's scary. It's
Totally.
hard, but
Right.
it kind of creates the potential for not doing that anymore. Like, I'm going to be who I am. And if you
Right.
like me, you like me.
Yeah. Well, and I think as facilitators, if we just work to create a container, not just because it's hard, like very intentionally create a container that is as safe as we can possibly make it on an interpersonal level and an emotional level, that we can also create an opportunity for that, people to have that experience. So I love
And if I
that.
could say something, and I know we don't have time for this because we discussed maybe talking about anger.
Oh, go for
And
it. Take a minute.
well, just to say, so in one of my groups, was it the last group, or recently someone said that my groups have a reputation for not being so safe.
Oh,
And then someone else was like, want to defend me against
oh,
that. But I actually felt like it was a compliment.
oh,
And because what does it mean? What does safety mean? And
mm,
often we think safety is safety from conflict and confrontation.
mm-hmm,
And so I don't try to eliminate that from groups.
mm-hmm,
So to me, the safety that matters is safety from judgment and being made wrong.
mm,
So maybe that's our job, is like, as soon as if someone says anything that sort of implies that somebody's doing something the wrong way or not good enough, to,
mm-hmm,
gently invite them to kind of take back whatever they said as their own judgment. To me, that's what makes a space safe.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then also confidentiality.
Yeah, I love that. Safety from non-judgment. Right. Because if we're not going to be judging, I mean, I think we as a culture have gotten so incredibly conflict avoidant that it's really problematic. And so I can appreciate how, you know, having an opportunity to experience some kind of conflict or anger emerging and have that be okay is actually huge. So,
Yeah. And I think that it's, again, it's like if I have anger to protect my boundaries and to keep distance from people who would hurt me and who
mhm,
would cross my boundary and violate it. But if that's been bred out of me, which most of us, what is our early experience of anger? Either someone's angry at me and it was horrifying, or I got angry and I got punished. So it's like,
mhm,
okay, don't do that. What's going to help us feel a little bit more safe is our judgment. So it's
mhm,
like instead of getting wrong at people, I make them wrong. Instead of getting mad at them, I make them wrong. And I
mhm.
kind of judge them, and that gives me a little feeling of distance. And that actually is what I think is toxic and
I agree with
hurtful.
you.
But anger is clean, and anger
Mhm,
is about me. If I can just say, when you did that, I got really angry, and I am angry, I'm not
mhm,
even saying anything about the other person. It's about me, it's my anger. So it's much
mhm.
cleaner than not doing that. And then people are compelled to have that critic come in and try to protect them.
That's so interesting what you just said about, I just make them wrong. Like I just feel like, because like this is a whole nother conversation, but I've been like, why does like non-anger always get to like win, be better than anger? Like as if anybody who gets angry is wrong. Like it might be wrong to like scream in somebody's face, or not. I don't know. But like, why is it that the non-angry person always gets to feel that sense of righteousness because, oh, you're angry now? Like, I think that's really toxic. I really do. Like,
I
so
question the whole notion that there is such a thing as right and wrong.
right.
And, and that's controversial. And people go, well, is it wrong to abuse children? And it's like,
Mhm.
well, does it make you mad? Well, yeah, it makes me mad. So what, isn't that enough? Do you have to make them wrong? Why don't you just get mad and do something about it?
That's so
So,
interesting. Yeah.
because a lot of our polarization and fighting is about who's right and who's wrong.
Hmm.
And if I'm engaging with a partner or another political party, either way, and I'm making them wrong, I'm not effective.
No. Well, and not only that, like, I mean, it's like, I think that, actually, that's kind of one of my like pet sort of inquiries into the psychedelic field in general is like, it's actually something we talk about in our level 1 training a lot. Like, how do you have a strong enough sense that you're doing something effective and that what you're doing is relevant and meaningful and useful while also staying open and not going into rightness or like righteousness, like where your way becomes the way, the right way, and other ways are wrong. Like you can be right-ish without making others wrong. Like how does that work?
I don't even embrace rightness. A part of
Right.
me loves it. A part of me just so happy to be right. But actually, I don't think I need to be right if I value what I want. I think a lot of our problem is being brought up where no one cares what we want. And then the only way to get what I want and need is to be right about it and prove it. And then that's what we bring into our relationships, and it doesn't work.
Right.
And
Yep.
if we can just go, you know what, all that really matters is that I honor what I want. And if I want to fight for it, I'll fight for it. And if I want to get angry because someone's taken that away from me, I'll get angry.
Right.
And no one has to be wrong. And I think it makes me a more effective advocate. Even as an activist, I think we're more effective if we're not making the other side wrong. We just go, I don't like what's happening in this country or this policy or what
Mhm.
you're proposing, and I'm willing to fight it. I think when we make people wrong, we go, that's wrong what they're doing. I mean, if you think about
Right.
what's happening in our government, it's like it's disempowering because if they can do this and it's wrong, if they have the power to do what's wrong, they must be special and have more power than me. So I'd rather just say it's not wrong. They like what they like. They want to have power. They want to have all the money for them, whatever it is. I don't like that, and I'm willing to fight. I think that's a much better place to be an activist from.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So just kind of ending with a kind of a broader question. Like, kind of after all this time working with IFS and breath work and body-based approaches and, ecstatic dance and did various things, like what do you think is your understanding about how healing actually happens? And then what else might you want to share as we come to a close here?
I really think it's what I was saying earlier about reconnecting to our split off parts, our exiles, and
Mhm.
how it happens is somehow we find a way for the protectors to understand that it's safe now,
Yeah.
that I'm big enough to hold them, no matter
Hmm.
how scary they seem.
Hmm.
And then kind of the art of it is, where do we try to invite the cat out of the room? Where do we
Hmm.
pick up? When do we pick up the cat, which has consequences
Right.
later? It's not the ideal thing, but it can be useful.
Mhm.
And um, and then I think as practitioners, if we're doing our own work and we can find space from our parts and be in a session with just openness and spaciousness and presence, then I think that's what brings a natural healing process.
That's interesting. That sounds like mindfulness, right? Like that's what the mindfulness practitioners would say as well.
Yep.
Mhm. So, well, anything else you want to say? And how can people find you? Like if they want to follow up with you with any of your offerings, like how can they find you? What do you have coming up?
All right. Well, thanks for that. Right now, we have our next group ketamine experience cohort will be in October, and that's at groupkap.com. So groupkap.com.
Okay.
And then for people who want to learn the IFS model, which is not just being IFS informed and understanding how parts work, but actually learning the maneuvers and techniques that Dick developed or really downloaded and got help with from other practitioners and shamanic practitioners, and like how to do the unburdenings and the order of things. And so our course for that is called IFS Essentials
Mm-hmm.
.com. So ifsessentials.com. And we have a new class starting in September. It's
Mm-hmm.
2026, but we do them pretty much every September and January or February.
Great. Okay, good. Good. And then your website is tedriskin.com.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Well, anything else you want to share before we close?
Just thank you. And I so appreciate how you do this. And, when I watched you do it in another place, I was like, you're really good at this. You're good at kind of drawing the things out and taking the conversation in a way that, in this case, I hope is interesting to people, but in the past has certainly been.
Good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I've admired you for a long time in this work, and it's really been a joy to talk with you and have the opportunity to do this. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Sandy. It was
All
fun.
right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.